Well, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to The Collision Live. Daniel here, as always, joined at the desk by the Ungoliant to the two trees of Valinor, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Daniel, I feel like I've heard you use that one before.
Yeah, does this feel like a little deja vu? Again, sorry if you guys were tuning in yesterday for our normally or scheduled Tuesday live stream. We had some technical issues. You could see us. You couldn't hear us. Some people might say that's an improvement. But we'll let you guys decide on that.
We hope those people keep their comments to themselves.
Yeah,
that would hurt our feelings.
Yeah, we hope those people aren't active in the discussion forum. But we thought, you know what, we don't want to take the week off. We had some stuff we were excited to talk about.
Yeah.
So this is our Wednesday edition of our Tuesday weekly live stream.
Nice.
And there's a lot going on too. This is a busy time right in the summer. I know this is busy outside of pop culture. My kids started school today, which is a crazy day for any of you parents or people with young kids, or if you are a kid going back to school. So what's up? What's up in the world of Samuel Camp?
Well, there's a lot of Olympics happening in our household. Thankfully, we don't have any school-age kids, so we are mercifully without that stress at this point. Like we've talked about it a couple times. Like, what are we gonna do? Like when she's old enough, and like so I'm happily not in school in any way, shape, or form. So that's been nice.
But it's coming.
It is, and it's gonna be.
It's on the horizon.
Before we know it. So
my kids love going to school. But when did the Olympics end? Like when?
Probably in like a week. I'm not sure.
I know it's been. I feel like we've talked about this before, maybe yesterday. But you know that I usually get so addicted to unhealthy levels to the Olympics. I just haven't got into it as much this year as. I don't know if it's just because it's COVID, there's the lack of crowds, just the time zone, or just that I'm super busy right now.
Yeah, I do think the having it on the other side of the world sort of it makes it a little bit harder because like you really just can't catch hardly anything live.
Yeah, and I'm always, I'm plugged into Twitter and to pop culture and all the news that I usually know the results by the time.
Right.
So I was like, do I want to watch it? But again, the Olympics always is. I think why it's such a big, obviously the sports, and if you're into sports, but people like us that end up watching like water polo and rugby.
Rugby has been sort of the dark horse sport for me this year. Like I'm like, wow, I think I really like rugby.
Yeah, it's like I think these obscure, more like fencing or things that we don't generally care about. The other 3 years or where there is an Olympics. I think it kind of shows that it's the Olympics like part or probably the most of the intrigue comes from the stories, like the human stories, the athletes, even more than whether you just get excited about watching diving or something. It's the stories. And this year, I don't know. It's been a weird, like unusual year just in general with COVID and everything. But it seems like a lot of the stories from the Olympics have kind of been just unusual. And I thought that would be kind of our first topic for today to jump into is probably the conversation that's come out of the Olympics so far is the Simone Biles. I don't want to call it a controversy, but it's just a discussion, a conversation. A lot of the talk that's kind of surrounded the Olympics is just surrounding her. And last weekend, right before we went on air to do our episode, she had just sort of dropped out of the team stuff. So we had mentioned it, didn't really know what that meant. Why did she have a physical injury? What it was? And sort of as now we've had a week to kind of marinate in and think through it. It really is just kind of a mental health thing that she's just didn't feel in the right place. Just struggling, some of the pressure, just all the stuff that she's obviously we're not her, we don't know exactly, but and this felt like she needed to step back, and kind of from that there's been just tons of different angles and hot takes and controversies. So why don't we just get into this a bit, and what does it mean? Like, is there anything as a Christian kind of listening in and reading and trying to see what's going on, like what is your first kind of initial takeaways from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways is maybe less about her and more just about sort of where our culture is and the way that so many people have responded or reacted to her announcing that she was stepping away sort of last minute or like mid competition. And I think it just again reveals how susceptible we are to like placing all of our hopes and dreams and all of this baggage and pressure on other people to sort of like I don't know, like live out our life vicariously through their triumphs and, just be crushed in their defeats and
Because she was the face of like not just gymnastics, but like
the
the
Olympic.
Olympics.
Oh,
Like, even
yeah.
all of the a lot of the commercials and stuff that is advertising it was like she is front and center. And obviously, it's
Yeah.
too late to change that. But
Yeah. And I think we should say from the top, it's like, there's just an unimaginable amount of pressure um, that was on her going into this. Like, she's considered the greatest of all time. Like, she is, like you said, really, at least for the U.S. and probably for a lot of the world, the face of the Olympics. Like, when you think about Olympic athletes, like Simone Biles is sort of on everybody's mind. And so, like, regardless of what happened and how it goes from here, like, just the insane amount of pressure that she was under, for better and for worse. Like, I just don't think we can quite wrap our minds
and we
around.
should acknowledge too that like obviously her not competing in all the events is going to be a big part of her legacy. That when we look back on sort of her career and stuff,
Yeah.
obviously that will be a part of it. She's already been to the Olympics and won, so it's not like she just her whole legacy is she just couldn't handle the pressure. Like
Yeah.
she's handled it for
Well, she's had nothing to. She really
yeah,
had
she has
nothing
nothing.
to prove.
She's proven that she she's super strong. She's won competitions with broken limbs and sprains. Like
Yeah.
some of the she's this weak and can't handle it is clearly false. But just because she's such a has this reputation as like unstoppable machine that she
Yeah.
just goes out there. She's immune to pressure. She because she's known for not being weak. I think it made it so much more of like a conversation as far as like mental
Yeah.
health. Like it's like if one of our teammates less known like had the same things, said the same comments, backed out, I feel like most people will be like, okay, like, that's unfortunate, but it's the Olympics. There's just a lot going on. These are young athletes. Like it makes sense. But because it's Simone Biles,
Yeah.
it's like, wait a minute. Like I thought she was like beyond that. Like she's almost like this
She's
immortal
ascended,
category.
yeah.
Yeah. That there's sort of I think, and I think some of the good that has come out of this is just a reminder that really no one's immune to some of these mental stresses, or that they're just sort of being off a little bit. Like even the greatest ones aren't. So like, what do you think as far as like as Christians, as the church? Like, what is that? How should we respond? Kind of going beyond just like any kind of hot takes. We don't know what's all going through her mind, or whether she cost her team or helped her team, all that stuff aside. I guess kind of more general, like how can Christians kind of like enter that conversation?
Yeah, well, I think one is just remembering that these highly trained, skilled, cool under pressure athletes are still human at the end of the day, and so they're going to have bad days. And I think for the church, it's I think one way, and I think we should be more on the forefront of this, is being able to recognize the need for mental health beyond just like, well, you should have prayed more, or like some cliche answer that the church gives to people who sometimes are struggling. And maybe I think oftentimes the church just doesn't really know what to do about that. Like, so if someone's struggling with anxiety, or if they have mental health issues, oftentimes it's maybe looked down on, or just sort of people don't know what to do. If it's like, oh, well, maybe you need to go see someone for counseling, or maybe you need, medical help for this mental issue. And I think oftentimes that's kind of seen as a weakness in the church. And so I would love to see the church step up more and being more proactive and saying, no, actually, like, it's okay if you need to have like treatment for this issue. Like, you would get treatment if you broke your leg. Like,
Yeah,
so
sort of
but because it's mental, like there's sort of this nebulous thing that I think it's really hard for people to really kind of say, okay, well, here's the right answer for helping people with mental health, because it's kind of this, there's the people who think it's kind of, well, you just got to toughen up and just, push through it. And other people who say, no, well, you just need to like just wallow in it too, and just, don't do anything that makes you uncomfortable. And so you have these like polar extremes where I think the truth is likely more in the middle.
I think some of the reason that the whole like the church's approach to mental health stuff, why it gets kind of messy or confused, or is sort of like conflating several distinct things. Like I think they're you look at, people are always complaining and about, the generations these days, and, these kids on college campuses that, if they hear one, opinion they don't disagree, they don't agree with, they're going to run out crying and shut down the school. And like, all a bunch of these snowflakes, and like, they kind of take that sort of flavor of kind of just sort of mental weakness and stuff. Yeah. And then they conflate that with, anxiety or genuine, kind of mental health issues, as though those are the same. Like, they're both, well, if this one's wrong and this is a sign that you need to kind of grow up and get over it, then that must mean that this one
or
is.
You just paint with a broad brush, and it's just like everybody, like, mental health is X, and it's like, well, that's, maybe one small part of it, but that doesn't represent everything about, like, mental health. And so, like, you just end up, sort of discounting everything that kind of comes under the mental health category, because you're like, oh, well, that's just people being snowflakes. And so,
yeah. And I think, almost like over the course corrected of that is just, the idea that any kind of anxiety or mental health stuff is like a sign of like spiritual weakness. If you just love Jesus more, trusted him, then you would never feel anxious about stuff. And like, it's just sort of this conflation of like, any kind of mental stuff means you're not a good Christian. You need to love Jesus more, which is just sort of a false, unbiblical. I think even a lot of, in scripture, it talks about, you don't need to be anxious and stuff. It's saying that because it's starting from a place that you're going to be anxious. There's things that are, but there's a place to go for that. And there's, God offers peace, and, there's an answer to that. But it's not saying that, if you do feel, if no one ever felt that way, then the Bible would never have to tell us, don't be anxious, don't be fearful. Yeah. So again, I think it's, and again, Biles is a Christian. She's talked about that publicly before. So I think it is, I don't know I'm not a psychologist or a counselor or anything. I don't know all the details of it as far as sort of the mental health, but I do think it's going to be one of kind of the more lasting impacts of this Olympics is just helping culture. And I'm hoping the church just to at least think kind of freshly about mental health, and sort of housing the church kind of join that conversation and help people that are, and kind of make it less of some taboo or some wrong thing. But we're curious, let us know your thoughts on the whole situation. Obviously respectful, even if you disagree or whatever your opinion is. I think it is going to be a very important conversation that Christians should be involved in. So moving on to the next section of our show, we have pop culture news. So a couple of things, nothing super groundbreaking or crazy this week. One thing, but we're going to talk about that in the next topic of our show and pull that out. But a couple of things that I just started to notice as I was following pop culture. One, Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney. Kind of a messy relationship. She just came out with her Black Widow movie. And I'm not overly invested in that situation. A rich actor is suing an even richer corporation. But a lot of that deals with sort of the new industry model of releasing videos on streaming at the same time. And, what does that mean? And I think it's just several other actors have kind of been following in suit. And it's just another sign of kind of growing pains that the industry is changing. I think it's just important to be aware of how those things are changing. Stranger Things 4 is coming out. They just announced it's coming sooner than we think, whenever that is. And that it will be more ambitious, which is every show has said about every next season since there's been television. I thought Stranger Things peaked season 2, and it was downhill in season 3, but I guess we'll see what happens. Lucasfilm hired a deepfake guy from YouTube. That was awesome. He was kind of showing them up, making better kind of CGI video things, deepfake of some of these characters than like Luke and Tarkin and Solo. So Lucasfilm just, if you can't beat them, join them, and they hired him up.
Give him a job. Yeah.
So it is, hey, if you want to make it at Lucasfilm, start making Star Wars movies, then maybe start making funny YouTube videos. And maybe this is the last thing, that the PBS classic Arthur. I don't know if you grew up watching that show.
Not really. I'm familiar with it, but I was never.
It's been around forever. I grew up watching it.
Viewer.
It was just kind of canceled, or it ended. I forget how many seasons, like 25 seasons or something. I don't know. It wasn't super clear why it was canceled, but I do know, like, the last time we talked about Arthur, kind of in the news, they were pushing kind of an LGBTQ narrative with some of its characters and stuff. And I don't know if that's if some of that impact it or not. But I did just think it's interesting that there is, in some ways, there's sort of this mindset that, if you kind of win the Twitter game, then that's good for business. And I think we increasingly kind of see that some of the more kind of progressive, pushing these kind of more secular narratives and humanistic stuff, in the long run actually has been hurting businesses. And I don't know the significance of that.
Yeah, winning Twitter battles doesn't necessarily help the bottom line.
Yeah, and
for some of these companies.
At the end of the day, the bottom line is generally what carries the day. It's all about money, so we'll see kind of what comes with that. But the second thing that I wanted to talk about, we could have included this as a pop culture news story, but there was no way that I was not going to have extended time to talk about this, to marinate in this. The Lord of the Rings on Prime upcoming TV show. I've been talking about this ever since they first announced it. I think about 3 years ago. This thing has been in the works. It's the most expensive show that will ever have been made. Something like over $300 million just for this television show. They finally released the first teaser image of the show, and this thing is just gorgeous. Like this is like the Da Vinci of movie promo releases. Like I want to frame this thing and like put it up on my ceiling to wake up to it. Like when you see this, do you get the same reaction as I do?
I think it brings all the feelings, and I think it's perfectly just an amazing representation of what Lord of the Rings is, and sort of just the fantasy and the just expanse and just the glory of Tolkien's universe. And so it does it, I think.
Does it hit the spot? I think we can put the picture up just on full screen so we can all sort of bask in this. And again, as a Tolkien nerd, I don't know if any of you guys are Tolkien nerds like I am. There's a lot in this picture to dissect. In the background, see the two trees of Valinor. This is basically Lord of the Rings, kind of heaven, paradise. This is where Frodo and Gandalf and all of them sail away to at the end of the trilogy. They're going to this kind of perfect place. This is the context of this seems to place it at pretty much at the beginning of the mythology of Lord of the Rings. It's probably going to be a prologue since the show is supposed to take place in the Second Age, which is significantly after that. But there's and we can take the full screen off. There's just so much to it. One picture. Maybe it's just that I'm, Tolkien's my homeboy. But it gets me excited to have more. Like the movies are, some of the most successful things ever made. Like the book is one of the best-selling books of all time.
Yeah.
But when you think about like just properties and stuff, there really hasn't been a ton.
No, it hasn't.
Mainstream Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I don't feel like they've really extracted a ton from Lord of the Rings. In a way, like it kind of reminds me, like I feel like you sort of compare it modern day to like Harry Potter, like sort of book to movie, and I just feel like that got so much more mileage, like just the whole property of Harry Potter. I feel like
Harry Potter world, and there's
there's way more mileage out of that,
like Broadway play and
exactly than something like Lord of the Rings. And I don't know why. I mean, that may be just sort of like the prerogative of Tolkien's estate or whatever. They're not just
I think even just that like J.K. Rowling as Potter is still active. She's still involved in these.
Right. So it's very different. But I think there's tons of stuff to mine and to sort of you could do with Lord of the Rings stuff. And it's not to say that there's not been anything done, but you do get excited to think about, so where are they going to go with this, and how is this going to kind of bring it back into the zeitgeist of the?
Because the thing that too, obviously I'm a Tolkien apologist for pretty much anything, but you kind of people that aren't as immersed in it as I am, is you think of like the Lord of the Rings. Sometimes people paint it as sort of a simplistic good versus evil, and it's which kind of in the context of all that he wrote. It's almost just like a footnote. Like it's not even one of the most significant things that happen in his mythology. Super complex, super dark, super nuanced, like just a lot of stuff. And kind of that's the question. I know we've talked about when this show was announced and some of the news, like kind of the worry and with this is sort of you have like, Tolkien is probably, he was old fashioned for when he lived. Like he loved old things, old myths, kind of bringing back some of that. So how do you make kind of a very old kind of styled classic story in a modern kind of society? Like, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just make an old classic. I mean, at least that would be my my hope and prayer is that it is just like an old classic story that's just really good and it stood the test of time and it didn't need a bunch of sort of modern, modern worldviews and stuff sort of pasted on top of it to sort of make it more accessible. I think it's extremely accessible and the reason it's stuck around for so long, I think, is because of the power of the story and just the writing and just the whole world building that he does. And so it's like, I don't think you need to sort of add your, postmodern 2 cents into the mix and make it something that's only going to, I think it would only lessen its appeal and lessen its punch because now you're sort of tagging it as like, oh, well, you can tell that this came out in the middle of whatever is going on.
Yeah. Then it's
Whereas I think if you stay true to the source material, you're going to have this timeless work of art.
well, and I think part of why it's so timeless too is like even at the time of like the books and he wrote it, they were not like conscious or not maybe not conscious, but like they weren't dealing with current social issues or like they weren't doing commentary on like the World War or like
right.
Obviously there's some influence. He fought in the war, like so there's some influence of that, but it wasn't like this is sort of a commentary on society and making some points and we need to update those now to reflect our current like
this is how the welfare state should work and
like the themes that he was dealing with were way more broader and theological and just sort of about creation and beauty and this goodness and virtue and things that aren't kind of tied to a specific time period. And that's kind of the other part about the show that makes me obviously I'm a little queasy, worried about how Amazon is going to make very much not have the reputation of someone to be entrusted with a very rich, deep Christian story, but because the story is so Christian, like fundamentally, and the mythology is very much Tolkien's faith is just everywhere in there. Like it's almost like Peter Jackson, who did the movies, is I think an atheist, but the movies still are like very rich with Christian stuff in there,
right?
Because that's just the story.
Right.
But I don't know. It's almost like you don't get many very kind of Christian stories made at this level.
Scale, for sure. Well, and you hope they don't sort of try and go the Game of Thrones sort of saga direction and just try and add a bunch of grittier stuff and try and make it more adult or whatever. And you hope they just stay true to the source material. But that is the concern, I think, probably facing a lot of diehard Lord of the Rings fans is they're just going to try and make it more like Game of Thrones or something. And
like The Witcher is another recent
The Witcher.
fantasy.
So, hopefully they have more sense than that. But,
and
I'm not, you never know.
And I think the estate has pretty good kind of like veto power. Like I think they, from what I've heard, can protect it from kind of too much confusing other kind of more modern stuff. And again, it was like some things like Game of Thrones. Like the irony with some of that is although like the author was very indebted to and loves the Lord of the Rings, the stories were almost like a reaction to that. So like to try and make it the new Lord of the Rings kind of in the model of Game of Thrones or something is.
It would just
sort of
be
going against. Here's the anti kind of Lord of the Rings. Let's make it like that. So I don't know. We'll see. We have this. What was the date again? They announced the date for this September 2nd, 2022. A lot of twos in there. So we have like 13 months for me to.
A long 13 months.
For me to try and bring up the two trees of Valinor and the fate of those and what that means for going into the first age. So we'll probably be talking about that at some point on this show.
Probably more than one point on the show. I think that's going to crop up.
But alas, that will need to wait for now. But let us know if you guys are excited for this, whether you're a super Tolkien buff geek like I am, or whether you just thought the movies were pretty cool and you're like, hey, I like fantasy. Give me a new show. Curious to hear what you guys think. If you're a nerd, I'd love to have a conversation, probably more than anything we've ever talked about on the Collision Live. If you have any opinions or theories on this promo picture, let's talk about that and figure this thing out before it airs. in 13 months. So this week at the Collision, a couple things that we have that we kind of dropped recently. One, we got a new movie review. It's just a video on our YouTube. We don't have the written review for this, but Jungle Cruise, featuring The Rock, Emily Blunt, two actors that I like quite a bit, based on a ride that I liked quite a bit as a kid. And the movie's not all that great, but if you want to hear more about why it's not great, or some of the good in it, or just kind of dig into some of the more philosophical themes or worldview stuff, and just sort of engage the film, encourage you to check that out on our YouTube channel. Yeah. And if you haven't done so yet, on our website, thecollision.org, we have a new or most recent article affirming the gospel in secular pop culture, just looking at can non-believers making art about other stories actually reflect Christian truth that can be edifying and encouraging to Christians.
It's a great article.
Well, thank you. So I encourage you guys to check that out and have a conversation. There's going to be a follow-up to it coming up soon. So I'd love to just talk about some of those issues with you guys. But anything else that stands out for us before we end?
No, I think that just about does it. I think it'll be interesting just with the Scarlett Johansson Disney stuff. This is sort of the new direction of entertainment, and so it'll be fascinating to see sort of how contracts get renegotiated and what that means for just the whole movie industry, and it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out.
And it's just a reminder too, like it's a business. Like some of we talk about it in like big idealistic terms of what's the best for cinema, and like at the end of the day, business and money drives a lot of the how things move. So it's important to be aware of some of that, even if it you don't necessarily have a team you're cheering for.
Sure.
But thanks for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed it just as much on a Wednesday as on a Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Next week we will be back on Tuesday at noon, as we regularly are, talk about more pop culture, more crazy stuff going on. So we'd love to have you join us. If you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, keep up with what we're doing, all our video reviews, live streams, other kind of fun content we have coming up. We'd love to have you be a Collider. Join us for that. Make sure you like this video. Have a great week, guys, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.